This is a motherboard giving a memory failure beep code, also called the beep of death. It also happens to be the sound my video editing PC made a few weeks ago, which is always a good thing, isn't it? After having tried every trick in my little black book and even a few new ones, it became clear that it was stuffed and I needed a replacement. The problem was I didn't have anything lying around that could run an i7 2nd gen CPU, so on short notice I had to scare up bits and pieces from my parts bin to put together a temporary replacement. In this video I'll be slapping together a replacement video editing PC with recycled used parts. Hi there. Today we're going to be doing a system build. I just wish I could tell you that it was going to be a brand new system build out of the box, but unfortunately there's no such luck. My budget is just too tight for that at the moment. Today being the 321st of January, I've got to make do with whatever is lying in my workshop. Why am I doing this build? Because in order to make good quality videos for my channel, I needed a dedicated PC to use as a video editing and processing station. So a few weeks ago I bought a complete second-hand i7 PC for that purpose, which cost me a whopping 2,000 Rand chunk of my meager savings. And at first it was great for the task. But unfortunately the crappy second-rate Intel motherboard turned out to be really sus and unreliable, and then died a grisly death a whole day after I finished the first video. It was fine when I shut down, and the next day when I tried to start it, it wasn't the RAM. But as it turns out, this sort of fault is really common for this make and model board, and after wasting literally days trying to get this thing to work again, I tried other options like trawling Facebook Marketplace again, only to be frustrated by idiots who advertise their stuff but don't reply to messages like where can I find you or what sort of motherboard is that. As a matter of interest, I saw another 4 or 5 PCs containing the exact same motherboard for sale on Facebook Marketplace that were being sold as faulty, needs attention, board doesn't work, etc. No thank you. But as they say, that was school fees. Sadly, not even I could bring it back from the dead. In the end, I had to use a completely different board and CPU, and it definitely wasn't any kind of anything. And that would be the one I'll be building into a case today. So you might say that today's video is not about an upgrade, more like a downgrade. The old PC was an Intel i7 2600 socket LGA 1155 on an Intel DQ670W board with 4 RAM slots stuffed with 12GB of DDR3. But after the death of the motherboard, all the usable bits left of my ambitious purchase was the disembodied i7 CPU, a small pile of RAM sticks, a 1TB hard drive, a DVD writer, the PSU, and the boring little shitbox it all came in. The board I had left to work with was a Gigabyte GA G41MT D3, and out of the pile of old CPUs I have lying around, the best of the lot I had that would work in that socket was an Intel E8500. The GA G41MT D3 is a socket 775 board with a G41 Express chipset, and a total of 8 USB ports front and back, 2 DDR3 RAM slots which are limited unfortunately to a whole massive 8GB. This was disappointing to me because from the outset I wanted a computer with more RAM slots, and that could run at least a quad-core CPU to make crunching a video a bit less like having your tonsils removed via an oral colonoscopy and root canal. Unlike the puny i7 2600, the muscular E8500 is a mighty dual-core 2.93 GHz beast with an astonishing 2 MB L2 cache and a front-side bus speed of 1066 MHz. That's fast enough to make my eyes water. Yes, I'm being sarcastic. On the bright side, this board has an overclocker's BIOS, so it seems that at one time it was something of a gaming platform, and that can only mean good things, right? But let's get started on this build already. This stuff is getting older and more outdated by the minute, and I can already hear the Paleolithic era beating on my door. In case you were wondering, that wasn't the right sound effect. This is my impromptu sound effects department. Say hello, Carly. Anyway, let's try that again. But let's get started on this build already. This stuff is getting older and more outdated by the minute. And I can already hear the Paleolithic era beating on my door. It wants its motherboard back. Alright, here we go. Let's put on the RAM. I always like to make sure that it seats just right. Oh man. Oh, you see, that's why they key these slots, so idiots like me don't try to force them in the wrong way around. Starting with the CPU cooler, I like to manage the cables by twisting them slightly and wrapping them around the fan casing, as you can see here. Then I orient it so that the connector is closest to the socket on the board. Now it's time to apply some thermal paste to our CPU. No need to go to town with it. When the heatsink tightens down on the CPU, it squishes the paste flat and thin between the two. Working with thermal paste, I think it's a lot like playing with clay when I was a kid. Messy, and I find it all over the place later, in my hair, on my face, on the cat. Intel really made life a lot easier when they standardized these coolers, because the old ones were a real nightmare. These ones fit into one of the 4 holes at each corner of the CPU, and you need to press these little hollow plastic pegs, the white bits, into the holes when fitting the cooler. Then you need to press the black pins down into them to expand the pegs. But to get it all to work out smoothly, you need to pull the pins back before trying to fit the pegs into the holes. You just slot them in and press and turn the pins clockwise until they lock. It can be a fiddly business, so it's best to do it when the board is still out of the case. That way it's easier to see if the pegs make it all the way through the holes out the bottom of your board, so the mechanism will work properly. Otherwise the cooler won't stick to the CPU and your chip will get hot under the collar. Lastly, don't forget to plug your fan in, or the fan won't spinny. Sometimes the fan cable is a bit long, so I like to tidy things up with a zip tie afterwards. Then we install the RAM, and basically our board is ready to be fitted into the case. I'm going to start by fitting the power supply for the system, which in this case is a 450 watt unit. It's always wise to fit case fans to your PC, and I'll be fitting one to the back of this one. Oddly enough, this case didn't come with much of a front plate to actually install a case fan, but I figure I'll keep an eye on the temperatures, and then if it needs extra cooling I'll improvise something so I can fit one later. Most new cases these days often don't even come with space for optical drives, but I still find them useful, especially for making backups and accessing past backups. When installing optical drives, it's important to ensure the face fits flush with the case face, or it's not going to look very nice. You'll notice these drives come with 2 mounting holes on each side. A lot of people just screw them down on the open side of the case and leave the other side free, maybe because it's too hard to get to if they don't have to take the back plate off first. And this can cause rattles and vibrations in the case, increasing noise levels. I prefer to put screws on both sides. Now the case is ready to fit the motherboard. I'll just stow these cables aside so they don't get in the way of the installation. You'll notice the little brass mountings in the base plate of the case. These are where you'll be mounting your motherboard. They're called standoffs, and they're fitted by screwing them into the holes that correspond with the mounting holes on your motherboard. I fitted these in the right place already, as well as the I/O shield that surrounds your motherboard's outside ports and connectors. When positioning the board, start by inserting the ports at the rear of the board into the holes in the I/O shield. Then lay the rest of the board down on the standoffs and shift it slightly so that the holes in the standoffs are visible through the mounting holes of the board. Now it's time to screw this baby down. They say you don't need to use electrical isolating washers on the screws, but I still prefer to anyway, on account of all the electrical problems I've encountered on PCs during my years as a techie. It might make no difference at all on newer systems, but then again it might make some difference, so I'll rather err on the side of caution. Now that the motherboard has been screwed down, it's time to start plugging things into it. It's nice to be able to manage the cabling so it doesn't look like a rat's nest in here, but with some cases like this one, there's not so much you can do to route the cables much, but I'll do my best with it. It can be a real pain plugging in the front panel connectors, and a magnifying glass does help. I really wish these manufacturers would make a standard one-size-fits-all one-piece plug socket thing so that aging PC technicians like me don't have to faff about with magnifying glasses and smartphone lights and macro cameras to see what needs to be plugged in, where and what way around. And now that I've had my little rant, let's stick in the front panel audio and USB connectors. If you're lucky enough to have a graphics card, now's the time to slot it in as well, making sure nothing clashes with the heatsink fan. Those things get quite hot. Now it's time for the hard drives. Again, these are fitted with 2 screws on each side. Then the power and SATA cables. And then some final cable management out back. Followed by the back cover. And we're done. But I'm not going to close the other side up yet, just in case I still need to adjust something. Now we have to see if this thing will boot. Oh man, it's always a pleasure when a PC build boots up on the first go. Of course, now Windows is booting up and going, well, that's different, and ooh, new toys. and sorting out its drivers for the motherboard and CPU.
A few moments later.
I can remember with older versions of Windows it was rare if you could change your hard drive out of one machine and put it in another, and it would boot into Windows without crashing and having to reload the OS. It really is the Borg of the IT universe. Resistance is futile. To sum up, since you're watching this video, it means that this little downgrade PC did the job. Now obviously, although it worked out fine, that doesn't mean this potato was as much of a pleasure to use as the i7 was. Even though the i7 dates from roughly the same era, it was a lot faster and smoother, mainly because it had more RAM and resources available to it to process video editing. This PC was limited to 8 gigabytes, which is just barely enough, I think. So while my editing suite was able to cope with the workload, it also crashed about 7 times while it was processing the video, which was due to insufficient RAM. A few people told me that my graphics card is too small. Now I used an NVIDIA GeForce GT610 with 1 gigabyte of RAM. But here's the thing. As far as I can tell, graphics cards are for displaying video. I don't think they really play much of a role in the processing of a video from an editing suite into a completed video file. So it makes sense to me that while it might struggle to display high-res games and high frame rate video, the resulting video will still be produced at the same quality level output as if I had a bigger graphics card in my PC. I bought the GT10 about 20 years ago, at a time when if you had a whole gigabyte of graphics memory, you were doing pretty alright. Today it's almost nothing. Even so, cards like this one are still being circulated around the internet for anything up to 500 Rand. That's probably around $40 for you guys overseas. Better graphics cards cost a mint these days. And I can't afford to throw that sort of money at a second-hand GPU, which I'll probably underutilize anyway. So again, this little 1 gigabyte card will just have to do. In the meantime, I solved the problem by enlarging my swap file, which not only didn't slow my PC down more, but stopped the editing suite from crashing and allowed it to run reliably. It's almost as if the graphics card memory really didn't matter that much, huh? That said, I'd call this operation a success. I again have a dedicated video editing PC. That's all we have time for. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of this video and suggest what you'd like to see more of. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, please. And see you again next time. Bye.